Morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Public Works. We have quorum, so we will begin. Could everybody set their devices to silent or turn them off? Does anyone need to declare a conflict of interest of any items on the agenda this morning at the outset? Seeing none, we do have some delegations today.
Mr. Chair?
Oh, yes.
I don't have a conflict of interest, but I wondered if we might move PW 49, which is 5.2 on the agenda, to immediately follow the two delegations.
Sure.
So we can deal with it in block.
Do you want a seconder for that? Is that a motion seconded by Councillor Timms? All in favor? Carried. So we've reordered the agenda. Okay, can Sue Moran please come to the podium? Welcome, Sue. You have 10 minutes to make your presentation, after which time you may choose to or not to stay at the podium and take some questions from council.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I appreciate your time, and I'll get right to work. So my name is Susan Murray, and I'm with the Niagara Cycling Tourism Centre, and we have a little presentation here about the Port Robinson Ferry. So the Niagara Cycling Tourism Centre is a resource centre, and we offer marketing help for small businesses and business support, cycling itineraries development for tour operators, just met with a German tour operator this weekend for cycling for next summer, and some business financing. We also have a program called the Bike Friendly Business Network, which we do audits for businesses or BIA districts and or municipalities, and it is supported by the Bike Friendly window decal that you see here, this little logo. A little bit of research from Transportation Options. So there's a lot of cycling research around the province, and it's a massive niche for all of Ontario. One that I wanted to share with you is called From Niche to Now, which is about cycling tourism. Businesses are feeling a positive impact from welcoming cyclists. Ferries, trains, bike share programs help paint a picture of cycle tourism in the province by tracking cyclists. The investment in cycling infrastructure and facilities is a positive indicator that cycle tourism is a growing sport, transportation mode, and tourism sector. I do want to point out at a recent meeting with Metrolinx that GO Train Services has added a third bike car to their train service to Niagara and increased ridership by 40% this year. The Port Robinson ferry needs have changed. So the need for that ferry has changed. The Port Robinson ferry, named Bridget, has become a link in Niagara's transportation network and integrated in the region's multimodal approach to the transportation network as per the Transportation Master Plan. It offers a safe and accessible transportation across the Welland Canal between Pelham and Niagara Falls. It's also more direct and takes less time for that cyclist. And I do want to point out that the Port Robinson ferry has never been promoted until this year. Super big difference for this, because it's actually a tool that people are using. So we did what Councillor Diodati had asked us to do. We formed a committee, and our first priority was to increase ridership. You'll see by the list of folks that are on the committee, we have a nice wide range of people, from members of the public, the freewheelers, of course, super important to this story, Port Colborne Economic Development Office, Niagara Parks Commission, Port Robinson Proud, a Welland City Councillor, chair of the GNCR, and of course, chair of the Regional Active Transportation Committee and the Mayor of Thorold, Regional Councillor and City Councillors and the CAO and staff. So what we did, they oversaw, mostly staff, oversaw the improvements, the capital investment. So accessibility improvements to the boat and ramps and docks on each side of the canal. A big, big project. Roughly $136,000 project, was funded in part by St. Lawrence Seaway Management Corp. Rankin Construction completed the work on the docks. Work done such as installing a ramp and on the boat and grading concrete docks has brought the ferry service up to code with the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disability Act standards. You'll see that this image, this is a complete different overhaul to that ramp. It's fabulous. Also, other improvements as instructed by this Councillor Diodati again, was to increase hours of operation. Was every day we operated from 9 a.m. till 8 p.m. It was a big, big day down there, or until dusk in the fall, just so it wasn't too dark. We increased marketing as we were suggested to do. So branding this safe, accessible transportation link to and from Niagara Falls. Signage around and leading to the ferry, on road and on the Greater Niagara Circle route. Promotion of the ferry through social media and websites. The promotional pins, which you have in your hands, we gave it around Niagara and on the boat. The rack cards distribution, storyboards at Lock 3, Lock 7 Information Center, Welland, Port Colborne, region of Niagara. Big, big regional product here. I'll keep going. Events, Freewheelers had an event on August 13th, very, very positive event, and we had a living flag event on Canada's 150 anniversary in Port Robinson. We're looking at developing the Pelham Spur, and I know that they're very excited of getting that done in the next few years, and the development of the Bridget route to and from Niagara Falls, and had the route endorsed at City Council in Thorold. The Greater Niagara Circle route then becomes 2 loops, a north and a south. So I'm going to show you some of the pictures. You see the pins, which you have in your hands on the left-hand side, some of the signage, directional signage, some that says to dismount, some safety signage around the Port Robinson ferry. Also banners on each side of the canal that promote the ferry. People couldn't see it on the west side, and we got a lot of attraction through this signage. This was the rack card, and I'm going to go right to the storyboard here that'll show you on the right-hand side of this photo where we have our Bridget route going from the Port Robinson ferry to Niagara Falls. One small item we need there is a little bridge near the train bridge, but we're working on that. So it's 2 loops, close to 100 kilometers each, where guests can hub and spoke. So you stay in Niagara Falls or in Thorold or in Welland or in St. Catharines, and you do the south loop and then the north loop the next day, or you can move around the Greater Niagara Circle route. So we're giving these tourists an option as well, and locals. So some stats, 2016 to 2017, you'll see we started June 10th this year. The only issue there was some of the AODA construction that went on, and the weather was very, very wet in the spring. So our numbers are high, 6,530 people. This is just till October 10th because we had to prepare for this presentation, but the Port Robinson ferry is still running right now. And in 2016, 3,736 starting June 1st. And where are the people from? Everywhere. Europe, Denmark, Colombia, Guatemala, United Kingdom, Czech Republic, Japan, Munich, Switzerland. This is a wonderful product. It offers a straight line to Niagara Falls. Kenora, Ridgeville, you name it, Niagara, Illinois, upstate New York, other provinces, Quebec, major rider here in Niagara. We've done some great work getting these tour operators to enjoy Niagara, and the GTA, of course. So the City of Thorold activities as it relates to the ferry. So they put the ferry into service in the spring. They take the ferry out in the fall. They coordinate contracts for service and repairs to the ferry. They coordinate contracts for labor to operate the ferry. They update all statistics. They provide accounts payable services. They coordinate and pay for marine insurance. They provide health and safety inspections of the site. Port Robinson is expanding and it's growing fast, especially on the west side. There are thousands of homes going in there. And the new overpass that was built only a couple of years ago leads directly to the Welland Canal and to the Port Robinson Ferry. Without the Port Robinson Ferry, this is just a dead end. And so the Port Robinson Ferry request for funding to this committee is to approve the City of Thorold's proposal to support the ferry's operation and maintenance for the next 10 years. And also, we'd love to see some consideration to be given to include the following components to the ferry's successful operation. So some of it is marketing. So when the region is making some decisions, whether it's marketing or implementing wayfinding signage or integrating your multimodal transportation, we'd love the Port Robinson Ferry to be part of that conversation. It's extremely important to these riders. Now, I'm going to conclude this, and I believe I still have a minute or so left, and we're going to show you a video. Thank you, Anne-Marie. Because we couldn't coordinate having you all come to the ferry to experience the ferry, we have a nice little video for you to see exactly what it is like to take the Port Robinson ferry named Bridget. Thank you. That concludes my presentation.
Thank you very much. Some questions from Chair Caslin first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, as you know, I'm an avid cyclist myself. Maybe you don't know, but I am. Former chair of the cycling committee here at the region, and I'm not sure if everybody knows, but we do rent a booth at the Toronto Cycling Show each year, and something that I participated in many, many years. And I want to tell you that the ferry is one of those novelties in Niagara that comes up as a topic of conversation of people all around Ontario that go to the bike show in Toronto. And especially this past year, Niagara was highlighted as one of those areas, one of those booths that got a lot more attention than ever in the past. It was really remarkable to see the number of people walking by the booth and actually pointing at the booth and saying, that's the Niagara one, that's the one. And so many people asking about the ferry as part of their experience in Niagara. It was really remarkable. As you know, Mr. Chair, I was at the GO train station on one of the summer Saturday mornings to see the bikes coming off the train. And again, it was highlighted by the people coming off the train as to what they wanted to do with cycling around, and the ferry was definitely included in that. And I know you're looking for a question. I'm going to give you that in a second. My first question is, how many people in the audience, Mr. Chair, are here in support of the ferry? Because I see a lot of cycling shirts. I thought so. I thought so. So my question, Mr. Chair, is to Ms. Moran. How important is active transportation in Niagara, including the ferry, as part of that contribution?
Through you, Mr. Chair, active transportation is extremely important, and it's not just in Niagara, it's all over the country. It's what we need to really focus on, and we need to think differently as far as transportation is concerned. So when I look at the buses that have bike racks in the front, you can have two bikes on a bus. You're two couples, and so many people ride in from Toronto. It's where we see a lot of action, especially at the Grimsby Gateway. And they're coming to Niagara Falls. And, well, we used to manage that, so I happen to know that. And then they want to go back by bus to Toronto. But there are two couples, and the bus shows up in St. Catharines, and there's two bikes on there already. They're trying to get back. It's a mishmash of craziness trying to get back to Toronto. So we have to start thinking different. That's how important active transportation is to the future, and I'll say of Niagara, but of the world, of our life. It's where we are now. So, and cycling tourism, of course, is to try and sit with a German tour operator on the weekend and tell them that, well, you can't really take the train back on Thursday, so can you bring the group in on Friday and then leave Sunday? We need to start thinking differently. So I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, and I thought so, Mr. Chair. You know, we spend millions on bike lanes on roads now that we've decided that every new road that we're going to do in Niagara is going to have bike lanes. I think this is consistent. I think this ask is consistent with what we're doing in other areas to promote active transportation. And I thank everybody for being here today, and I want to thank you for your presentation, Ms. Moran. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Councilor Luciani.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Ms. Moran. In 2016, we had about 3,700 users. And in 2017, it's almost doubled to 6,500. What we're not telling council right now is the fact that because of the construction of the facility, we were basically behind somewhat behind the 8 ball, and we never got started till about I think June 10th. So obviously, the question I'll ask you is that that 6,500 will be considered next year. Probably will be considerably higher because we'll be starting on time, and we'll probably be ending later in the year, probably Thanksgiving's Day as opposed to October 1st. Can you expand on that, please?
Mm-hmm. Through you, Mr. Chair. Absolutely. We were delayed, and we had to do the job well. As you see from the video and the pictures, it's magnificent. It's really a lovely little ferry station, and those numbers are also only until October 10th. With more promotion and the committee that we have together, very active committee, very dedicated. If you want something done, ask cyclists to help you because they will get it done. So absolutely, I could see our numbers really skyrocketing there at the ferry, and just having more time, going all the way to 8 o'clock at night. It was massive. It was a very big difference. So we'll get much better, much tighter at what we're doing. I did look at some numbers from 2008 to now, so for 10 years. And it was, I believe, over 60,000 people have used the Port Robinson Ferry. That was with no promotion whatsoever. This is all brand new. Considering we receive funding and we can move this forward, we already have plans, like shovel in the ground plans and ideas for marketing and promotion. So we're ready to go. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, okay. I was talking to some people, and they were telling me about some unusual things, unusual commerce that might have occurred at the ferry. Maybe you can expand on that for me, please?
Through you, Mr. Chair, with pleasure. It was funny, I was there one day talking to the staff at the ferry, and one lady was on the shore of the east side, and she told me, look up. And so I looked up, and a gentleman was walking down the ramp with a parcel. It was the Purelator guy, her address says west, but she's really on the east side. For some reason, she can't have that fixed with the postal people. And so he had to take the ferry to deliver her parcel, to have it signed and deliver her parcel. So he said, I don't usually have this route, but I'm going to ask for this route whenever I have to go deliver to this lady. This is an adorable service. And I want to point out that there are many riders here that meet up with people from all over the world. I mean, they all have their own stories here. And I know for a fact that Mayor Luciani has escorted people to Niagara Falls using the Port Robinson Ferry because they were lost and they were looking on how to get there. So there are many, many stories of different things that happen there. And we're happy to do some research next year and show you exactly what the picture looks like.
Bridget basically was created to cut the Greater Niagara Circle route in half. The full route is probably about 170K. That's kind of a stretch for most people on a bike, especially tourists coming into town. And Bridget now cuts it in, like I said, Bridget cuts it in half. Now, to do 60 to 70K is a nice ride in a day. I can do that. I can't do 170. Do you feel that by cutting the circle route in half, this will attract more tourists, more riders to the facility?
Through you, Mr. Chair, absolutely. I've been in tourism here in Niagara for over 20 years, done a lot of cycling shows, a lot of leisure shows, a lot of tour group trade shows. This is a wonderful product. People are envious of Niagara because of the Greater Niagara Circle route, and now that we can split it in half, it's a much easier ride. So when you do trade shows and you're standing in front of a lot of couples, and they're looking for their destination, go sip wine and enjoy the food and see the falls. Our destination is the best in Ontario. And it's a wonderful entry-level destination because it's pretty well flat. We do tell them about the escarpment, but otherwise it's extremely flat. So you can get somebody who's a great rider and somebody who's not as great like me enjoy that 60, 70 kilometers. So when you show them the Greater Niagara Circle route and you say it's 140 kilometers, and most of the guys go, ooh, I do that in a day. I know, sir, but you're on holidays and your wife does not want to do that because she's going to see beautiful things. So it's a wonderful addition to cut the Greater Niagara Circle route in half.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor August.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the presentation. Congratulations on doubling the numbers and certainly getting the involvement of the community and especially the cycling community. My question, I will have comments later when we deal with the report, but my question is there any sponsorship potential? This was raised previous meetings, the idea of sponsorship, et cetera. So, and just as a prelude to that, I can see if, for instance, you might say, well, if it's year to year, maybe somebody's not going to sponsor it. But if there's a foundation here and we say, okay, for the next 10 years, which is what your request is, the region is supporting, would that help with sponsorship, or is there any sort of sponsorship potential that you know of or have talked to people, et cetera?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. We have talked about that at the committee. It would be nice if someone stepped up. We feel the region has been the sponsor, and that's the way we have been promoting the partnership between the City of Thorold and the region of Niagara. So you are our sponsor. A lot of people have thought, and I've been in this business a long time, with events, let's go get sponsors. The hoteliers should be really, really happy. Well, there are a lot of hotels in Niagara Falls. And by the time you get the attention of the owner of that hotel, and he gets 100 people a year, and they get 50, and they get 200, I don't know if they're going to see return on investment for that hotel. For Niagara, you will see return on investment. So if there is a housing development or a shipping line that wants to help us, in a long-term relationship, there are volunteers working on this, and it's nobody's job to go chase this type of sponsorship, though we would be happy to have that connection and think about that in greater detail possibly. It is a lot of work, and there has to be a return on investment, or it's just a good public relations sponsorship.
Okay, thank you very much. That's helpful. Thank you. Thanks for the presentation.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Timms.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you, Suzanne, for the work you've put into it from the perspective of tourism and the value of this Bridget to cycling tourism in Niagara. And especially thanks to the City of Niagara, City of Thorold, for all the effort in maintaining this over the last couple of years. This council had supported the last 2 years of operation, and you're asking now to maintain that same level of support for another 10 years. The 10 years, how does that line up with the deal you have with the Seaway that allows the crossing to happen? And how important is that 10-year commitment to I guess, the value and the opportunities in terms of the sponsorships that Councillor Augustine was talking about, and just the stability in building a market presence for the cycling tourism.
Well, through you, Mr. Chair, it's extremely important because that's the contract that I believe the city of Thorold has with the Seaway for the next 10 years. So they have rented the water to the city of Thorold for the next 10 years. Without water, we didn't really need Bridget. If we couldn't get that contract, we wouldn't be here. So it's extremely important that we align those two contracts, of course. And I don't want to get confused that this is just about tourism. This is about active transportation and the people of Niagara using the Greater Niagara Circle route. It's unbelievable. Everybody rides. I mean, and if you're not riding, you should be. But it's just incredible how the folks in your community need this product to happen. So it's not just about tourism. I come from it at that angle, but I know there's another presenter that'll talk to you about what the cyclists are doing in Niagara at this time. But yes, that 10-year, that number is extremely important to this project.
Well, thank you. And Mr. Chairman, I've used the Bridget to go from Port Robinson West to Port Robinson East, probably to visit the Bridge 21 pub that also sells ice cream, I say. So they're an opportunity. I think, you know, signs on the ferry, signs at the landings. Those are the kind of things that you're able to pursue once you have a 10-year commitment. But it also speaks to the value of the local use. And perhaps the next presenter will talk to that. But as I understand from the recent planning decisions in the building that's happening in Port Robinson West, there's about 1,057 units under draft plan that have been approved and are being built in Port Robinson West. And maintaining this ferry maintains the link between Port Robinson West and Port Robinson East that used to be there when I was a kid back in the 70s, before the Seaway or the bridge came down and the Seaway decided not to replace it, which in effect split Port Robinson East from Port Robinson West and pretty much stopped growth in that area. So the plan that you're presenting offers service to the local municipality as well in terms of the 1,500 housing units that are being built. Is that part of what you've been considering in terms of the use and viability of this plan?
Through you, Mr. Chair, absolutely. And just to comment on your first comment that you made, is that Bridge 12 is a restaurant on the east side. They've put signage on the west side, and people are going, oh, there's a restaurant over there, and there's ice cream, and you know, this is infrastructure that is feeding our local economy. I understand it's one business, but NTEC, their staff are using the Port Robinson ferry to get over to work as well. There are other uses that are happening around the Port Robinson ferry. I also wanted to point out that Highway 20 is the other option, and I think the other presenter may talk about this, but it's extremely dangerous. Extremely dangerous. I won't ride anything that has an 80-kilometer speed limit on it. So, you know, developing the Bridget route with Lions Creek Road as opposed to Chippewa Road, Lions Creek has an access to the QEW, and you see trucks and big vehicles coming down that road. So Highway 20 is out of the question to ride on, unless you want to take your life in your own hands, and I guess we all do that every now and then. But so it's important at that respect as well. So Port Robinson businesses are allowed to make money, and we're there to help feed them as well, whether it's NTEC or the ice cream or the beer guy or restaurant. They have food as well. So I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Maloney.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I noticed you appeared to have 2 operators on the ferry. Several years ago, I frequented that ferry on a semi-regular basis, and they only had 1 operator, and he seemed to handle the craft very easily. Could you reduce your overhead by having just 1 operator, or are there restrictions that require you to have 2?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I believe there are restrictions and that they have to have 2 operators on that boat at all times. And the city may be able to answer that question. I don't work for the city, but, and I don't work on that contract, but I believe that they have to have 2 operators on the boat.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's the only question I had. Perhaps Mayor Luciani could enlighten us on the requirements of 2 operators on the craft?
Mayor Luciani, you want to take a crack at that?
Yeah, we were mandated to add an extra a deckhand for safety reasons. Otherwise, we wouldn't have been able to run the ferry at all.
So is it a requirement?
We were mandated. Pardon? Transport Canada.
Okay, is that a regulation? Can someone produce that regulation, please, at a subsequent meeting?
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Pachowski.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation. Niagara Cycling Tourism Center, are you the operator? Just want to understand
Yeah.
your roles.
Yeah, it's a project of Venture Niagara, something that we started about 4 years ago. We've been in the cycling tourism business for about 10 years,
Okay,
and it became that important that we started that.
okay, perfect. How large is the tourism center? How many people? What's your staff size?
Through you, Mr. Chair, there are 2 staff people.
staff?
And our general manager.
Okay, thanks. And and funding? So is our funding coming, is the region's funding coming through to you, or does it go to
Through
the?
you, Mr. Chair, it goes to the city, I believe.
Okay, so you're contracted then as an operator?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I am also the tourism agent for the city of Thorold. So Venture Niagara has a contract with the city of Thorold to promote the city of Thorold, to do their marketing, and also to manage the Lock 7 Information Center, who sees a tremendous amount of cyclists there as well. So I do community economic development in the Niagara region.
Okay, thanks. So would you, because of the ridership stats you've quoted to us, are you involved in collecting that information? Is that coming from you when we finally get some hard numbers on this?
Through you, Mr. Chair, it is collected by the staff at City Hall in Thorold and put in a database. So I have seen from 2008 to 2017. But I do not personally collect, though as the tourism agent for the city of Thorold last year, no, I think it was the year before, we did do some research down at the ferry, but it wasn't a full year. It was a finite period of time.
Okay, great. And through you, Chair, just anecdotally speaking, if you can, if I drew a line at the 50-year bracket, do you have an idea of what percentage ridership is over 50 and under 50? I'm just using that as a kind of a middle bar.
Through you, Mr. Chair, riders are generally 45 to 75 to 80 years old.
Okay.
With a lot of money to spend. That's another research on cycling and cycling tourism in Ontario that I could have brought with me, but it's a very, very lucrative niche.
Okay, thanks. The reason why I asked, Chair, is, you know, my dad passed away this year, made it to 98 and a half, and he rode his bike up and down all parts of Niagara, especially in the north end, till he was 92. So when I'm trying to reconcile the numbers, the question I appreciate from Mayor Augustine about sponsorship, and I think that's worthwhile also never to give up on, maybe not so much on the tourism side, but maybe a local bike shop, because at least probably half of your riders are local. So there may be an economic benefit for one of the bike servicing stores and or the bike suppliers. But it's not hard for me to reconcile the dollar amount when you strip away necessarily the tourism and everything else, which obviously throws money into the economy from the foreign visitor side. But if this ferry, Mr. Chair, keeps people active and keeps them on their bikes, let's face it, one visit to the emergency ward for a heart situation can be well over $65,000 And exaggerate those numbers, through you, Chair, across this ridership, keeping people on bikes and keeping people active. And if this even draws people into this activity, the numbers are staggering, how much we're benefiting people and just prolonging their life and their quality of life by having exercise. So it's an easy number in that sense for me to reconcile really quickly. So I think it's an intangible number and it's a hard number to capture, but if most of your ridership is over 45, well, I'm not going to try to guess their age, but knowing, like I said, my dad, I know it kept him healthy to 92 before he suffered his heart kind of setback. But cycling is something that seems to be really taking hold in Niagara. So I think the financial benefits from the health side are huge and enormous, and it's going to be easy for me to support that because it's part of the piece, but it's an easy number to get around. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Height.
Yes, through to the presenter, the councillor brought up an interesting point. Are half the people that are using the ferry from Niagara are 3/4? What kind of numbers are we assuming? You spoke about tourism, about all the people from all over the world, which is probably a smaller percentage, I'm assuming, but what kind of numbers would you give us?
Through you, Mr. Chair, and this would be just a guess.
That's what I'm looking
So,
for, an idea.
I don't want to be lambasted by my friends back there, but anyway, I would say 30% are probably from away.
Okay.
Toronto, you know, if we're talking about Toronto as being, you know, not from Niagara, they may or may not be staying over. So a tourist is described as someone who stays overnight. So they may or may not be staying overnight. So if I'm counting some of Toronto, and trust me, I get a lot of phone calls from people just from Georgia. We want to come up, and where do we park our car for 4 days? And, you know, so and the more we do, it's one thing with infrastructure, not with necessarily economic development all the time. I would not support build it and they will come. That to me does not work anymore. You have to do a lot of work. But with infrastructure on cycling, you build it and they will come. It is just incredible. So I'll guess at 30% from tourists to 70 local, including Toronto.
Okay, thank you. Through to the gallery, if I may, because the chair's already done this. I assume most of the gallery is from Niagara, if I get nods. Are many of you, if I can ask the question, moved here in the last 5 years from outside Niagara? There's a few, okay. And I'll speak to that later when we deal with the report.
Thank you, Councillor DeAngelo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks for letting me speak because I'm not a committee member. Just a couple questions here. The one thing I hope that doesn't get caught up on here is I know they talked about, there was questions about sponsorship. And Sue, I want to congratulate you because I know you've worked really hard with the volunteer group that's been putting this plan together, working on marketing and promoting it. I don't want to see a lot of that time diverted into trying to get sponsorship. Maybe if you could highlight maybe some of the key areas where there's some potential sponsorship, but I find a lot of small organizations, especially when they have limited resources in terms of volunteers, if they're going to spend half their time trying to get sponsorship, then half the marketing time disappears and the whole project fails. Maybe if you could elaborate a little bit on that, because like I said, the numbers are increasing quite steadily, and I know there's been a lot of great projects that have been put out there in terms of marketing it, but I just wondered to get a little bit more feedback on your thoughts in terms of how much time should be spent on trying to attract sponsorship from the local businesses, because like you mentioned earlier, they are taxed by other people that are trying to get their sponsorship too. So maybe if you could elaborate a little bit.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Thank you. I meant to mention earlier as well, we have talked about several ways of showing some good, benevolent, you know, support financially from people. They do ride the Port Robinson ferry saying, you know, how do is there a box I can put money in? Is there something I can do? Personally, I don't manage the ferry, but I would not want to see a box with money down there. It's a little too scary when you have money in a secluded place like that. There might be an issue. But in 2017 or 2018, and we're talking about the next 10 years, I'm happy to discuss this more and more, and there may be ways through crowdsourcing or online. You know, our little rack card could say, if you enjoyed the ride, please help fund the ferry. I think we would see some uptake there, that type of discussion, but I'm happy to have this discussion at the committee level where we can do it in a safe manner, and that the sponsor or the supporter, it feels a return of happiness because they help people stay healthy, or they're looking to drive business to their business. We all have different reasons to do that. So there may be other ways, and it might not just be knocking on the door of a business, but we have to think for the next 10 years. And I think electronically, we could get something done that may be supporting the system. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. It elaborates on it, which is excellent. And the other question I had, in terms of customer service, the staff, and I don't know if you can answer this because I know the staff are managed through the City of Thorold, do they receive customer service training, and is that a focus for them? I know they would be health and safety and also utilizing the proper techniques of boat handling, but is customer service one of the items that is focused on for the
Through you,
employees?
Mr. Chair. Actually, this year, the City of Thorold undertook an ambassador program training for staff at City Hall and for small businesses, and our Combined Chairs Alliance at the city put together an ambassador program. And we even brought it to the Port Robinson Ferry staff. So we brought them in and we shared that with them. And of course, there were a lot of things that we did. It was like some big spray of work that we did this summer, hoping that we get funding and that we continue this good work, because we have all of these ideas. I'm a hospitality professional. I've been in the tourism industry for many, many years. I'm a former hotelier, and customer service to me is of the utmost importance. So I'm very glad that Councillor D'Angela brought that up. And we do want our service providers to provide the best in customer service. So we did do some training early on. We're happy to continue with this ambassador program. Once we get funding, we've got a whole, bag of tricks to pull out.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That answers my questions.
Thank you. Councillor Diodati.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to thank you for being here, and I 100%, it's very easy supporting this. You know, it's funny, I just saw some statistics this weekend, Mr. Chair, that even among the below 35-year-old age group, that the average teenager spends 6 hours a day in front of a screen. 6 hours a day in front of a screen, which is absolutely unbelievable. And then we wonder why we have childhood obesity problems and all the other issues that kids are dealing with. And I can tell you firsthand, I watched the GO trains pull into Niagara Falls, and hundreds of bicycles getting off at a time, and they just split down the parkway. They go every which way. And we're extending our trail system right across the city of Niagara Falls, north to south along the canal. And we're now linking up our northerly section right onto the Niagara Parkway. And eventually it's all going to connect up to the Greater Niagara Circle Trek. So we're building a spider web of trails. And I like to say we offer a buffet of fun and excitement in Niagara. And a lot of people come with their bikes, and they come looking to do that part and see the entire region. And what a great way to do it. And it doesn't matter what age you are, what ability you are. It's something everybody can do. I do it with my kids too, and we really enjoy it. So this is an easy way to make sure that we have continuity with the ferry. It takes the uncertainty away, and we can market the full trail. It's hard to market when you think there might be a dead end, but when we know this is going to be continued, we know that we'll be able to continue to market, because a lot of people, including Europe, we get a lot of inquiries. They plan their cycling destinations well in advance, and they need to know where they're going, how they're going. They're booking their vacation rentals along the way, or camping, or whatever the case may be. And we've also got, for tourism in the region, we've got major bike tour groups that plan their trips here based on our trail network. So I think the day has finally come. We've matured to the point, and this is a very easy one to support, Chair. Thank you.
And your question was?
And my question was, I see in your report here, they added a third car to the GO train and ridership is up 40%. I assume that they're looking to add a fourth car next year. Is that the question?
Through you, Mr. Chair, there are a lot of people investing in Niagara in cycling. And that's the point. GO Train, Metrolinx, we were at a meeting just a month ago, early September. They are investing in cycling and bringing people into Niagara. They're in the business of active transportation. And the other people that are investing in Niagara are the Waterfront Trail, the Trans-Canada Trail. These trails are all promoted, not by anyone, well, I do, but not by anyone else, all over the province. And Niagara is part of that. So if Niagara fails at delivering that guest experience, we've broken the link in the province of Ontario. We've actively played a role in breaking that linkage in experience, and Niagara cannot afford to do that. We are the experience in Ontario. So the Waterfront Trail put signage at the GO train and the Via train station this summer, directing them to commerce. They actually put up signs, they paid for that. So we do have bigger partners, provincial partners, that are investing in Niagara in our infrastructure for cycling.
Seeing no further questions, I want to thank you coming forward for making your presentation and taking so much time out of your day to answer those questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Can I now have, there's another presentation from David Hunt and colleagues. Could they come forward, please? Gentlemen, if you could, Mr. Hunt, if you could start out and introduce yourself and your colleagues, and you have 10 minutes for your presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members. This presentation is from a new cycling organization in the region called the Niagara Cycling Club Alliance. My name is David Hunt, and I'm a member of the Niagara Freewheelers Bicycle Touring Club and treasurer on its board. My role this morning is to introduce the two co-presenters and be present for any questions at the end. Wally Trokolitz on my right is president of the St. Catharines Cycling Club, and he'll be doing the first part of the presentation. The second part will be done by Robert Romanok. He's a resident of Niagara Falls and a member of the Niagara Freewheelers Bicycle Club. Both of these individuals are experienced cyclists, and they know cycling issues within the region and beyond. So I'll call on Wally to do the first part.
Good morning. As Dave mentioned, my name is Wally Tykalis. He gave a version of the pronunciation of my last name, Tykalis. I'll go on record. I'm a proud resident of the city of Port Colborne and who happens to be a great neighbor of the township of Wainfleet. As Dave mentioned, my name's Wally. I'm president of the St. Catharines Cycling Club. Part of my presentation has already been given by the learned questions from you, so I'm going to stumble here a little bit because I don't want to appear to be a broken record. So I'll explain a little bit about the Niagara Cycling Clubs Alliance. Sue was perhaps the greatest catalyst in the formation of the Niagara Cycling Clubs Alliance. We were formed mainly for one reason, and that is for safety of the cyclists of the region of Niagara. This is several years ago when Sue approached me, and at that time, if we kind of reflect back, there was a rash of cycling accidents, whether it be intentional or not intentional. The intentional part is, if you recall a few years back, we had some assaults where drivers of motor vehicles viciously assaulted some cyclists along the road. That transpired, and then there was actually accidents or collisions in which cyclists and motor vehicles were colliding. And that's what kind of a little bit of the background of my conversation with Sue a few years ago. But since that time, much has transpired. We met and we formed the 6 cycling clubs of Niagara, and it's important to identify them, and they are the St. Catharines Cycling Club, the Amici per la Vita Cycling Club from Niagara Falls, the Bike Fit Sunflower Squad from St. Catharines, the Forza Niagara Cycling Club from St. Catharines, the Niagara Freewheelers Bicycling Club, Touring Club, which is region-wide, and the Short Hills Cycling Club, which is also region-wide. We boast a membership of over 800 members. Now, the prerequisite to becoming a member of the Niagara Cycling Alliance is a few things. One, you have to be an incorporated, non-profit cycling club. Second part, you have to be fully insured. So we are insured clubs. We're not fly-by-night organizations. I speak for St. Catharines Cycling Club. We're the oldest cycling club in Niagara, and we've been around since 1971. Originally, the foundation of our alliance is to promote and educate and advocate the safe cycling and cycling awareness, and to build partnerships to achieve our goals. We are together to hold events to promote cycling, and as was alluded to in Sue's presentation, we hosted a very successful event in the town of Pelham to celebrate Canada's 150. We had over 400 cyclists from around Ontario and United States participating. Our membership, it's really quite impressive. Our membership includes former professionals, current Hall of Famers in the Canadian Cycling Hall of Fame, and it's worthy to mention their names. And in the cycling world, they're famous to us, and they're local, and they're just cycling heroes. One being Stephen Bauer, whose name is well known to all. Another is a world champion, and that is Gord Singleton. And our last, who was just inducted into the Canadian Hall of Fame, a Niagara resident, Karen Strong. These are former professionals, world champions, who are renowned worldwide. Our membership also includes international champions, national champions, provincial champions, and local region champions. Council spoke of who are our membership, or who rides on our roads. Well, you know, the elite riders are only a small percentage, but our membership is mainly of the masters' ages. And someone alluded to how old we are. Well, how young we are is really quite evident by looking at our field. We are that mid-range age, and our highest aged member is not quite old as your dad, who passed away, but is currently riding out there with us at a really good speed, and he's currently 85. His name is Willie Graham, fantastic rider. And so we do incorporate a large age group. We're here today the Niagara Cycling Club Alliance is here today to corroborate everything that Sue has said, and to go on record that we fully support the Thorold's bid to fund the ferry for us. And us being, we are the people who ride the ferry. It's very significant to us. Region has created this wonderful system of roads and paths around the region, and they all meet in the center at the ferry. The ferry provides two things, which I'll touch on now. I'll end my speech now. The ferry helps us in aspects of safety and in health. The health, which Mr. Petrowski mentioned, is that cycling is just good for you. It promotes health. The money that we invest in now prevents money being spent later in the health system. Second, our council has created this wonderful maze of roads and paths. But in it, we've realized that it's being used, and there are some safety hazards out there. From a cycling perspective, the ferry is utilized by the riders to prevent interaction between motor vehicles and our cyclists. And the two main focal points that we're concerned about, which the ferry helps us out immensely, it removes traffic from Highway 20 to the north and from the Thorold Tunnel I'm sorry, not from Thorold Tunnel, but further down the line, but from the Welland Tunnel, the East Main Tunnel as well. So, and those are two big concerns to us, which we avoid at all costs. All roads lead to the center, and the way we cross the canal is by utilizing the ferry. So it's very much utilized by us. I mentioned earlier that our membership consists of 800 riders. Well, it's actually much larger than that because of our extended families. For every member, you can see that there's going to be another person or family members or neighbors that come along with us and ride. So that 800 gets multiplied greatly. The users of the ferries also include these outside organizations. Oops, my goodness. Which I'll let my colleague Rob continue. I'm sorry, I apologize for running late. So Rob.
Thank you, Wally. Members of council, members of staff, I'm just going to hit the high notes here to finish off. We're talking about the ferry, but we seem to overlook the fact that for cyclists, the canal is an obstacle that runs right through Niagara. And the ferry is one of the easiest and most enjoyable ways and a unique way of crossing that barrier. Next slide, please. The freewheelers ourselves, we have over 20 routes that utilize the ferry in our routes. And by taking the Niagara Circle route that Sue outlined earlier and being able to cut it in half enables figure-8 routes on both the east and west side of the Welland Canal. So it enables tourists that may be spending their evenings in the city of Niagara Falls to experience the municipalities on the west side of the canal. One thing that cyclists, for cyclists, the ride is the destination in a lot of cases. Just getting out there, being on your bike is what you're trying to do. And if anybody here hasn't seen the lock walls in Port Robinson on the east side, I encourage you to do so because it's historical, and it also shows that the ships didn't just climb the escarpment, they also had to go down over a high point. If you look closely at the walls, you'll see that. Now, if I can just go straight to the to our ask, would be the second last slide, please. Yes, thank you. The Niagara Cycling Clubs Alliance requests that Regional Municipality of Niagara approve the City of Thorold's proposal to support the ferry's operation and maintenance for 10 years through a cost-sharing arrangement, and secondly, that consideration be given to including the following important components to the ferry's successful operations, namely marketing, promoting the ferry service, implementing ferry wayfinding signage, and full integration of the ferry within the region's multimodal approach to its transportation network, as approved earlier this year in the 2017 Transportation Master Plan. And I'm a little over, but if anybody has any questions, we're more than happy to oblige.
Thank you very much, gentlemen, for your presentation. Councilor Petrowski.
Thank you, Chair. A question, thank you, presenters, for the first presenter for Wally, is it? Since I raised my dad already, Chair, I'm going to raise him again. One thing, my dad, who brought us up in cycling, one of my first prize gifts from him was a 10-speed Peugeot bike. So I think I got a 10-speed before I got one with a banana seat. I almost bypassed the banana seat, which dates me. But my dad was a big proponent of safety. And I'm just going to leave you with this, and maybe I'll put it into a question that you can respond to. I live out on Lakeshore Road. There's lots of cyclists out there. Cyclists, safety is a two-way situation with motor vehicles. And cyclists are very quick, and as they should be, to remind us when we're driving, when perhaps we get too close or whatever. I just encourage you that it's a little bit disappointing, but also I guess anxious raising when I see how many people, and they belong to clubs, ripping through stop signs just because there's no cars. And I wish, and I believe that bicycles have to obey the same stops or same traffic signs as motor vehicles. I wish that, and my dad taught me, you know, when you come to a stop sign on a bike, there might not be cars coming, but you stop like a car does, and then you go. And I think we're going to just, it's not if, it's when, Chair, we're going to have an accident, because for the most part, and I'll say this, for the most part, I see cyclists going through stop signs when there's not vehicles, and that's very concerning to me, and I hope your organization has an opportunity to address it, because it seems to be chronic.
I'll respond to that. You are absolutely correct. There are cyclists that do not stop and do not obey the rules of the road, as motor vehicles. One thing that I'd like to point out is that all our clubs have organized rides. And on these organized rides, they are controlled directly by our clubs. These rides are totally insured by our clubs. They obey. When on an organized ride, you will find that we adhere to the 1 foot down principle when you ride a bike. When you come to a light or a stop or whatever, you put, as long as somebody in the group puts 1 foot down, and then you'll see a mass of bicycles crossing the highway, or we attempt to. So I would submit to council that our rides are ridden in accordance to the rules and regulations and the laws of the Highway Traffic Act. I would like to, and part of our mandate is safety, and we encourage these riders who are non-club riders to join our club, and as well as when our members leave our organized rides, that they continue these safe riding habits on their way home. I hope that answers your question.
No, I really appreciate that, because the outcome between a vehicle and a bike is probably easy to predict. The vehicle is going to win most of the time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Rigby.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you very much. I have been a much better rider in my past than I am right now, but I do get on my bike once in a while. And it's usually to get to the market downtown and back, but I confess that I have not been on the ferry, and I intend to do it. I think I'll drive my car up to the top of the escarpment and ride to the ferry and back. Now, if you could get another system that helps people get up that escarpment, maybe we could call it climate, and we could go on forward. But I do have a question, and I probably should have asked Ms. Moran this. In her map that she showed to split the routes, which I think is a wonderful idea, she mentioned the need of a small bridge in the crossover between where the ferry is through to Niagara Falls. And I have a suspicion that's over the QEW, and it isn't that small. Is that something that you're looking at?
Through you, Mr. Chair, there was an email that Sue had shared with a number of us. And I responded, I think, with a considerable amount of detail as to what that reconstruction of the QEW overpasses over the Welland River would entail. And I see that as a future opportunity for a bridge should Canadian Pacific no longer require the spur line that currently goes underneath that bridge and serves one, possibly two industrial customers in South Niagara Falls, then the two trestles that cross the Welland River, that lead to the tiny island that goes to the hydro canal that runs through the city of Niagara Falls and across that to Dorchester Road, that corridor would be an ideal corridor to include with the let's call it the shortcut, the halfway
Okay.
ride. Because as you see right now, the lines go up and down because they have to get across, Chippewa. Does
Okay,
that answer
well,
your question about that?
I think, yes, it does. So there is a possibility in the future that detour, if you want to call it, which is marked out as going down to the bridge that's has been built when the widening of the QEW on we used to call Sandplant Hill. Is that not what we're looking at here?
No, this is south of McLeod Road, or get through you,
Oh,
Mr.
that's
Chair.
a different area.
From south of McLeod Road. there-
Yes, okay, I got it. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Timms.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm trying to think of a question beyond thank you to the presenters. I think I have one, but first I want to thank you for the term master's age. I like that. And secondly, I just want to thank the St. Catharines Bicycle Club. When St. Catharines kind of pioneered the idea of an off-road trail alongside the Welland Canal, that's got to be 20 years ago now. It set the standard for that the rest of the region, and Welland took a big step. It set the standard for the rest of the region to really establish that off-road cycling trail. So I want to thank particularly the St. Catharines Club, but the whole coalition and all three of the presenters for putting forward the case for the off-road master's age cycling facility. So, and that's really the question, the value of the Circle Route and the Bridget connection as an off-road facility compared to the three other crossing alternatives that you mentioned in your presentation, the bridge and the two tunnels. Just could you speak to that in terms of, well, I guess the master's age, but also the family and kids age, the value of having it off-road?
Through you, Mr. Chair, thank you for asking or allowing me to elaborate on that. That was one of the things I was going to be speaking about. When you're in a car and you got to cross the canal, it's only a little bit of gas in a few minutes, to take one crossing or another. When you're on a bicycle, it's a more daunting challenge to get across the canal. I can speak personally that the steepest hill in Niagara are the two hills that come out of the Thorold Tunnel. So you achieve speeds, breakneck speeds over 60 kilometers an hour if you're not using your brakes going downhill. Your eyes are watering, you're breathing fumes. It's not a very comfortable position to be in, especially if there's a pedestrian or a cyclist coming towards you. And then as you start to climb your way out of the canal, once you get into daylight, then you're faced with the really steep part of the tunnel. Just have a look at the sidewalk on either side. The crossing at Highway 20 is also not the best crossing. I would advise cyclists to walk their bikes across on the sidewalk the way the Seaway suggests that. But in order to make a loop, when you're on a bike, the ride is the destination. If you go to a point, you really want to come back a different way. And Bridget enables that to happen with so many different rides. The tunnels in Welland, they're not nearly as severe. You got that little chicane to maneuver around to get in and out. But, we understand that you got to keep motor vehicles on one side of the canal or the other. But the sulfurous fumes in the Town Line Tunnel, are a little something you just have to deal with, even in a car, but you can't hold your breath that long on your bike.
Thank you, Councillor Timms. Councillor Bentley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to thank the presenters and also Ms. Moran for the presentation, because I absolutely support cycling and especially safety in cycling. I've had occasions where very young people that I used to coach emphatically told their parents they have to wear their helmet because Coach Bob wears his helmet. I've got a master's age, very active person in our community that promotes active transportation. I found him riding his bike without a helmet on. I made the point, and he's told me 3 times now that I've got my helmet on, I wear my helmet. I actually have an adult daughter now who walked for about the last 6 years before she got her license, because one of the rules of the house was, if you don't wear your helmet, you're not riding your bike. She says, I won't ride my bike. I went, fine, then you can walk. My question to you, or my ask of you, I'm glad that there is an alliance here. One of the things that still concerns me, and I was glad that Councillor Petrowski brought it up, it's not the stop signs per se, but quite often out our way, I'll drive the rural roads. I'll find a mass of cyclists, so I'm assuming it's a club or an organized ride, but they're taking up both lanes. And that's just dangerous for the cyclists. I slow down and make sure that at least somebody knows that I'm behind them and honk the horn and, oh yeah, okay, we better get into one lane, but take the whole lane. But you're dealing with 20 or 30 or more bikes at a time. But if you could, through your alliance, pass that along as well. If they want to be respected by the driving public, they need to obey the rules of the road and sticking, you're entitled to the lane of traffic, but stay in the lane of traffic, not take up both lanes. So if you could just pass that along, I would certainly appreciate that. Thank you. But I do support the ongoing support from the region, and I know in our municipality, Councillor Quirk is very active with groups in our municipality to try and increase our number of cycling loops through our municipality in both urban and rural areas, because we understand the benefits of it as well. So thank you.
Just to add to your comment, what is supported with the Niagara Cycling Clubs Alliance and their rules of road, or their riding etiquette, is a little phrase that we've coined, and that is tight and to the right. We advocate that our riders hug the right side of the road and remain a very close proximity to each other, a foot or 2 feet between each other's handlebars. Where we run into problems is the lack of paved shoulders. The problem that you described is in rural areas where there is a stone shoulder. The road bicycles are a 23, 25 millimeter wide tire, and a high pressure tire, which is about 100 pounds per square inch. It's a very thin. To go onto the stone portion of the road, you're risking in the likelihood of a puncture and even more a dangerous situation. I apologize for the cyclists, but that is a situation where the riders do veer onto the road or the path of the whatever lane that they're veering in. And it's also complicated by the road conditions, potholes and whatever, and taking evasive maneuvers. I can tell you, as a president of one of the clubs of the Niagara Cycling Alliance, we advocate traveling on the less traveled paths, and we advocate using the path and the route system created by council. So we're endeavoring to go, and it's a ongoing, and it's a work in progress for us.
Thank you, Councillor Bentley. Councillor D'Angelo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I too would like to thank the presenters. As a past member of the St. Catharines Cycling Club, I know the great work that you do. I have some comments, but one question I had is just in terms of history, I know the St. Catharines Cycling Club has to be here at least 50 years, if not more. Maybe if you know the exact date, it's not a new phenomenon. Cycling's been very big in Niagara for a long time, and teaching cyclists how to ride properly with a helmet, following the rules of the road, have been here a long time. But unfortunately, there's always bad apples in any group, and I'd like to share one with a vehicle. I was going down, I call it Brock Hill, but it's Glenridge. When I was in a vehicle and I was driving behind a car, and the lady was actually driving in the bike lane, not on the road, the bike lane down there. So there's some really bad drivers out there too. So we have to make sure that both people are educated so that we can coexist, so that it's safety for everyone. But maybe if you could give a little bit of the history of not just the Alliance, but how long some of the clubs have been around and the significance of cycling.
Great question. Unfortunately, I can't speak for the other clubs. I can only speak of St. Catharines Cycling Club. We were incorporated in 1971. It was basically from Thorold is where our roots were. It was a cycling enthusiast by the name of Jim Craig, and there was a town councilman from from Thorold, who was an accountant, who was also a founder of the St. Catharines Cycling Club. We're proud, St. Catharines Cycling Club has its roots in competition cycling, which is something that perhaps the rest of the groups can kind of buzz in here, and perhaps you can explain freewheelers.
Well, as a freewheeler, I'm a recreational cyclist. Getting there in a hurry is not part of what I expect to do when I get on my bicycle. It's, the Freewheelers is a social club. There's a number of events that are scheduled throughout the year. The rides try to take in every part of Niagara, so they provide variety for people. And the other aspect about the freewheeler rides are they're varying in distance and difficulty. So they cater to riders of all levels. I think some of the other clubs that were mentioned are more of a performance cyclist aspect. The Amici Club in Niagara Falls, for example, have passed my wife and I on occasion. And the Short Hills Club, they focus more on off-road activity in, well, in the mud, let's put it that way. At least mud doesn't bother them like it does some of us. So cycling, it just takes in so many different aspects from all different groups of individuals and age groups that live in Niagara.
One question. First of all, I'm shocked that Councillor Petrowski skipped the banana seat. I envision you on a banana seat bike with a basket and a little license. But my question is, Councillor Diodati in Niagara Falls raised about $325,000 for 4 outdoor basketball courts and tennis courts it's at Niemeyer High School, and it's open to the public and it's free. Since we raised the money from the private sector, we're now, it's getting a lot of activity, both tennis and basketball. So I'm trying to create a sinking fund so that when the basketball nets need to be approved or the tennis nets need to be replaced, I don't have to go and raise more money. So we're asking, there's some leagues that have started up, 10 men on a team, and they play every Tuesday night. And I'm saying, can you guys just donate $10 each? You're playing all summer long. We'll put it in a sinking fund. Now, I wouldn't call it a sinking fund in the case of a ferry. But I heard Sue talk about crowdsourcing or something like that. Is there going to be, as we move forward, and there's funding coming forward from the region clearly and from City of Thorold, that you'll all engage in this type of activity to try to come up with something so that you don't always have to come back for, capital improvements, for example?
Yes, thank you for the question, and through you, Mr. Chairman. User fees Sue did touch on, and that is, I think, a possibility that cyclists as users of the ferry could consider. Sue mentioned that it could be done electronically, a safe means of showing support. I think bike retailers, there could also be a role there, because ultimately they are part of the beneficiaries of cyclists using the ferry. So helping to support the ferry from the users that actually get a benefit from it is a very good possibility going forward. And I think most people who do use it would be glad to pay their share that way.
Yeah, we're finding that rather than trying to charge people to mention why we need a fund and making it voluntary, they actually are perhaps even more generous than when you're charging them. So
sometimes all you have to do is ask, and
right.
People come forward. Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you all for your presentation and patience. Okay, there's no further delegations on this, and we have moved the item PW 49 2017 forward. I need a mover and a seconder for the item. Moved by Councillor Grenier, seconded by Councillor Timms. Any comments or discussions? Councillor Grenier.
Thank you. I only had comments on this. Didn't really have any questions. I'm in favor of the presentations, but
I think we're missing the point that there is somewhat of a moral obligation on behalf of the regional municipality of Niagara to maintain this connection to two parts of a community that were separated by an unfortunate accident on the Seaway. This corporation decided to take the money and not hold the feet to the fire of the Seaway Authority to reconstruct the bridge. So I think that irrespective of the history, for this nominal amount, I think that this makes good on our obligation to do what upper tier governments across Ontario are mandated to do, and that's to connect people to each other. So I believe that it should be the only reason, but if you want to use the wonderful presentations and the great tourism benefit that's occurred as a result, that's even easier for us to get behind this project. But anyway, thank you. I just wanted to make sure that that was not forgotten and that this doesn't become exclusively a tourism presentation. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair. Certainly appreciate the presentations, and I'm very, very supportive of this. But I think that there's another opportunity. So we heard a lot about cycling, but I do think there's also a tourism component to this in addition to cycling, just people taking it. Councillor Tim spoke about that a little, getting the ice cream across on the eastern side of Port Robinson. So we're in Drumheller as a family this year, and in Calgary they have this little pamphlet, and they say, when you're in Calgary, here's your trips that you can take. Do a day trip to Drumheller, which is where all the dinosaurs are. Look at the museum, and when you're done at the museum, consider this. Drive over 11 bridges, which we did. Have lunch at this place, which we did. And also go across this little ferry that's operated by the provincial government in that case, and just drive over it. So we did that, and we enjoyed it. We loved it. It's sort of like we weren't cycling, but the idea of enjoying the ride, being with your family, etc. So I think, you know, I hope Regional Council will approve this, and I hope it's something that we consider in some of our packages, saying, when you're in Niagara and you're using that cornucopia, as the Mayor of Niagara Falls talks about in Niagara, one of the pieces is drive over to this ferry, take it across, see what it's like. It's a unique thing to do, not only for cycling, but for just tourism in general, pedestrians. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Councillor Height.
Yes, thank you very much. The unique possibility of going over a ferry, it sounds a little romantic, exciting. It would be fun to be in Toronto and come over our unique ferry. But I asked a question about how many people from out of town, and I happen to sit on the board of the Bridge Club of Niagara representing Councillor Volpatti because we're both members. And I was at the board meeting last night, and it was brought up that we have 4 new members coming in to Niagara into our club. 2 of them are from out of town, and the 2 people that joined St. Catherine's Bridge Club decided to come to Niagara because there was an organization in Niagara that played duplicate bridge, because that's part of their lifestyle. So if you think of that, it's not only tourism, it adds to the big bucket of what we can use to attract people to move down to Niagara, especially when they want to retire, because as we look in the audience, it looks like some of them are retired by age. So if they are masters and they want to come from Toronto and enjoy their life now that they can retire, here's an opportunity to come to Niagara and enjoy Niagara. One thing that I'd like to see, though, in this motion is the amount of up to $66,500. And one of the reasons I'd like to see that is if you start fundraising as an organization, if they do, and they attract enough money, maybe the region and the City of Thorold will not have to contribute as much money. So I'm not sure if that's friendly enough or not. And the other thing is, as a councillor asked me, is our logo on the ferry? Because if we're the major funder, we should be promoting the fact that this is part of Niagara Region's fundraising tax dollars, paying for the use of this ferry. Thank you.
Councillor Height, I don't think that's that simple an amendment that it would be friendly. I think you'd have to move second and debate. You can discuss that at budget when it comes up. Okay. Councillor Pachowski.
Chair, I wanted to call the question because selfishly I want to be part of the vote to support this. So there's two people after me, so I'm hoping that they'll be brief so I can vote. Otherwise, I'll withdraw my calling the question because they've plopped their names underneath mine.
Are you sure Rigby and Tim's are usually never brief?
Then for the record, I already expressed my support for this because of the health benefits, and it's coming to council anyway. I'll make sure I support it again, and I appreciated the presentations. Thanks,
Councillor
Chair.
Rigby.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think I certainly support this notion, and I also pleased that the city of Thorold is involved as a partner in this. We're their partner, really, because they're putting the same amount of money in as the region, and so if we're putting logos on, probably should be both. But I wanted to talk about the Welland Canal, a world-famous place, and very few people get the opportunity to actually be on the water on the Welland Canal. And this is one of those opportunities that anybody within our own community can finally say, I was on the water on Welland Canal if they go to the ferry, and I like that. And that isn't the only reason why I'd vote for it, but I think it's something we very seldom really think about, and how many people know about the Welland Canal across this world that we live in. So I certainly support it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Rigby. Councillor Timms.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was just concerned about the notion of the up to being added. I think the number is clear, and we don't want to make it fuzzy at that point. But there is great merit in your suggestion about a reserve fund for various aspects of this, including, ferry replacement. The ferry won't last forever. There is some money set aside, I think, part of the Seaway deal, but there will be, that's always something that you'll be looking forward to in the future, where your reserve fund, not a sinking fund, but the reserve fund is an excellent idea. The crowdsourcing, all those kind of options would be helpful. So that's as brief as I can be, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Timms. Councillor D'Angelo.
Thank you. I just want to share one quick story, just because this does have a great impact on the youth of our community. I participated in the Canada Living Flag, which was around July 1st in Thorold. My son actually rode his bike there, and subsequent to that, he's been riding his bike pretty regularly. So by promoting and using this ferry and having activities around there, it actually, well, in my case, it actually got my son into riding his bike, and he subsequently uses that to do his job in the summertime, when he cuts lawns, he would ride his bike. So this actually introduced the heightened and awareness of this, actually introduced the youth into using this as an active transportation for a healthy benefit. As Mayor Diodati said, I think it cut his screen time off by about at least an hour to two a week, which for any parent, that's a great accomplishment. So thanks for everyone. And I definitely support this. I can't vote on this, but I will be supporting it at council. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor D'Angelo, and I'm going to take the last word since there's no further speakers. I just wanted to mention maybe some of the crowd that's here. When I was a member of provincial parliament from 95 to 2003, a lot of times Councillor Timms would come up and he would be spotted leaving my office. I'd have other MPPs say to me, I saw Timms leaving your office, what's he here about? And I'd sometimes roll my eyes and say, he's always here about the Greater Niagara Circle route again, and he's here about cycling again. And they'd ask me, well, what does he want now? And I'd say he's just raising awareness or advocating on behalf of it. And since I've been here since 2010, he has continued to advocate for the cycling community and the Greater Niagara Circle route. So I think you've had no greater champion, and I know a lot of politicians support cycling in a lot of communities, and he's not alone, but what I've watched since the year 2000, I've seen no greater champion of the cycling community than Councillor Timms. So congratulations on your efforts and seeing so much happen for the cycling community over the past few years. So now we're no further questions or comments. We're going to have a recorded vote on the motion.
The vote is open.
Yeah, Councillor.
I didn't know I had to sign out. See the little asterisk? I'm not a member of this committee, so please strike that no, please.
Councillor DeAngelo actually doesn't have a vote, so that's a unanimous vote. Thank you. Requested for a 5-minute recess. 5-minute recess. The requested 5-minute recess. We could all take our seats. Except for Councillor Bentley, you can by all means stand and lean. We're waiting for one more person for quorum. We have 11, we need 2 more. Henry's not on the committee. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. We need 1 more for quorum. So we could use the chair, we could use the exalted Councillor Timms. Yeah, he's getting slaps in the back. Oh, Henry. We got 12, 3, 4, 5, 6, 13. Okay, we're back with the quorum. Moving forward, I have a bylaw regarding an application for encroachment to Region Road right-of-way, PW 48 2017. Can I have a mover and a seconder? Moved by Councillor Quirk, seconded by Councillor Volpatti. Any discussion? Councillor Augustine.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair. I read this with interest and certainly appreciate staff bringing it forward following council and committee directions. Just a couple of questions. This year, I went on as part of the Congress of New Urbanism, went to Seattle and toured a community called Bellevue in Washington. And they were telling us there that they actually encouraged, because of the climate, lots of rain, they encouraged encroachments on property, and they used it in their downtown core. So storefronts having awnings coming out or parts of the building coming out, etc. I know we're not encouraging this necessarily and they're paying for it. They're actually giving credits for this. I guess my question is, have we thought of something like that? Have we used that in our downtowns for those kind of purposes? So this would be, again, as climate is getting such that it's going to rain more, it's sunny, etc. Having those encroachments, I think we had one in Port Dalhousie actually, and it was a big kerfuffle. But those are, other communities look at those as good things. So under this bylaw, can we look at those as good things, or we haven't dealt with them, haven't thought about them?
Commissioner.
Through you, Chair, I'll start with what's proposed for committee today is permissive. It's not preclusive, it's permissive. Current state right now is prohibitive. They're expressly prohibited. Exceptions come to council. This is the region of Niagara's first step into entertaining and being permissive about these encroachments under certain conditions. Is it at a point now where we are encouraging or incenting? Not yet. Okay. I would suggest that this is an appropriate first step. And I guess the 2 other sort of key things about what's before council, 1 is it creates a permissive environment. 2, it creates a consistent and hopefully streamlined process, but also fees associated with that, just in terms of dealing with the process of applications, and also the delegated authority to the Commissioner of Public Works, so as it doesn't have to come to council.
Okay, great. Mr. Chair, just given that, I wonder if it's something that we can forward to the Smarter Niagara Steering Committee as well, and maybe I include that as an amendment, just so that that committee can have the discussion. Not that it's going to change for information, not that it's going to change this, but maybe it's something that the committee can suggest to regional council after it works its way through this in terms of the incentives for those types of things so that you can have that, especially in the downtown core is what I was thinking of. So I don't know when that, if I can add that as an amendment, that it just be circulated to them for information.
Okay, so, Councillor Icy, I'm happy to entertain that amendment.
Yeah, just for information.
There's also, the plan right now is to have fees associated with these things. And I think we need to have a policy discussion on that because you're talking about it being an incentive and the staff's kind of leaning towards new fees. There's a lot of signs and right-of-ways right now that have been exceptions to the prohibition, but personally, I believe business signs should be allowed to have some encroachment. I think signs that have been there for a long time need to be grandfathered. And we really need to consider if we want to be charging fees for the stuff or if we, right? So maybe we can say this goes to the Smart Niagara Steering Committee and the procedures and permits come back to this committee too, so that we can have a policy discussion.
All I'm looking for, Mr. Chair, is simply that this goes to them for information so we can have the discussion that I just sort of had here.
And then back
That's
here.
all. They're going to work on it for a couple of meetings, so.
Okay.
That's just for information that it be circulated to them. That's all. That's all I'm asking. I'm not asking to be part of the process. I'm not asking to be anything like that. Just for information.
Commissioner.
Through you, Chair, and I just would add, and certainly I'm supportive of continuing the dialogue. The two examples that I'm aware of within Niagara are St. Paul Street and St. Catharines, Queen Street and Niagara Falls, where there is more of a deliberate attempt to encourage activity on the right-of-way. Both of those are not regional roads. Those are just the examples that I'm aware of. We can certainly look further as we go forward.
Okay. Yeah, I don't want to hold this up, Mr. Chair, in terms of, I think it's a good thing to do, just circulate it to them. So another question, you mentioned signs, Mr. Chair. I didn't see in here the portable, what are they called, the sandwich signs? Again, I'm thinking of the downtowns. How are those A-frames? I didn't see that in here. How are those dealt with? Is there a fee for that? Do they have to provide? I know on Pelham Street, you have to provide insurance for that. We don't want somebody tripping over them and then suing the municipality.
Commissioner.
Through Chair, I can't recall a specific reference. This will be the protocol around fees, and the fees themselves will be coming back to council through the approval of the rates and fees bylaw. I'm going to take in the input now and provide some further detail when we have that discussion.
Okay, that's great. That's helpful. The final thing, Mr. Chair, is what happens in the case of a conflict? And I'm noticing something between 6.1 and 7.1. So it's a little, it's not clear in what the conflict is. So under 6.1, encroachments will only be permitted on the approval of the commissioner. The commissioner shall have the designated authority to reject or accept applications, et cetera, right? So this is, as we ask, giving delegated authority to the commissioner. But then it's restating the absolute authority of council to approve or deny the encroachment agreement upon regional, I don't know what ROW is, review, I guess, right of way. Thank you. So how do you get from the commissioner has absolute authority to actually the regional council has absolute authority?
Excuse me, through your chair, the intent of that language was to set a clear expectation that council wishes the operating department to manage this. But ultimately, there is always an appeal to council, and that would be a request directly to the council through the clerk.
Okay, that's what I thought, but it's not, I didn't see the word appeal. I didn't see that listed in the bylaw, and I wonder if maybe staff could look at that and see whether that language needs to be included here. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Quirk.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Augustine asked my question for me, so I'm good.
Councillor Height.
Yes, I was concerned about the appeal process. That's fine.
Okay. Thank you very much. Seeing no further questions, all those in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried. Okay, moving forward to PWC 43. Recommendations for consideration of the Transportation Steering Committee meeting held September 19, 2017. Moved by Councilor Volpatti, seconded by Councilor Luciani. Any questions or comments? Councilor Augustine.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Sorry, just a bit of a housekeeping thing here. The recommendation sheet that came to us says nothing about the minutes. It's just what was included there. Do we not also have to receive the minutes, or?
There's minutes.
I know there's minutes. What I'm asking is, it's a bit of a pedantic question, sorry. We have a memorandum from the clerk at the time with the recommendations. Is not one of the recommendations from the committee to approve their minutes, and do we not need to approve that?
Clerk?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we don't put the minutes on for approval. You're just approving the recommendation that came out of the minutes. That's been our process for some time, and you'll notice that's the same with the Waste Management Planning Steering Committee recommendations.
Yeah, I noticed. So I guess isn't one of the recommendations that the minutes be approved?
No, you're just approving the recommendation to amend the terms of reference.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Timms.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to discuss that aspect that the councillor brought up. The under the former system, could have a great long cycle in between a recommendation of a committee and then the committee has to confirm the minutes, and then only after the committee's confirmed the minutes does the recommendation go to council. And it ended up, you could have 3 months between the committee's recommendation and council making use of the recommendation. So this process that we've adopted now allows the committee's recommendation to come to council pretty quickly after the committee has made the recommendation, and lets council deal with the recommendation, and let committee deal with the committee minutes whenever the next meeting is. Because it started to get to, committees met every 2 cycles, so it would be 6 weeks between committees. So this is an effective and efficient matter of dealing with the recommendations of a committee. So they're actually helpful in a timely manner. So I think that's why the process has evolved this way, and I do like the way it works now.
Thank you, Councilor Timms. Councilor Quirk.
Thank you, Chair. Ever so briefly, this actual recommendation in front of us is not actually a recommendation that came from the Transportation Steering Committee. The Transportation Steering Committee actually asked to appoint 2 members, one through the Accessibility Advisory Committee and the chair of the Active Transportation Steering Committee. And the result of that is that we are actually have more members than what our terms of reference allowed. So this actually recommendation comes from the clerks, not from the committee itself, just to take the terms of reference for it. So I think it's appropriate to have it here, along with the minutes that that would allow us to do the other appointments.
Okay. Seeing nothing further, all those in favor? Oppose, if any? That's carried. Can I get a mover and seconder for PWC C44 recommendations for consideration from the Waste Management Planning Steering Committee? Moved by Councilor McGregor, second by Councilor Maloney. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Oppose, if any? It's carried. There are several consent items for information. The GO Implementation Office updates on their Burgoyne Bridge project and the Clean Water Act Standard of Care training dates. It's all November 1st, one session in the afternoon, one session in the evening, and it's probably important for us to sit in on that. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. We're good with quorum. Is there any questions on any consent items? There are. Do you want to move them in block and then?
No, I want to refer 6.3, the Burgoyne Bridge one, 6.2, 3, and 4.
Okay.
To the Burgoyne Bridge Task Force.
Okay. I have a seconder. Second by Councilor Quirk. Councilor Timms.
Just want to take a minute to thank staff for putting together putting together these reports, and that they be received and then referred to the audit committee, because the Burgoyne Bridge Committee, just so that they're on the record and they are
Receive
available
and refer is fine,
until,
Chair.
Okay.
until that they're on the record and available and all the way up to that meeting.
Okay, and Councillor Volpatti, I'm going to go to Councillor Augustine next. He's raising his hand, but Councillor Volpatti, is there a date for that meeting?
No, but I will arrange one with staff
Yeah,
right
and can-
after this meeting.
Okay, I think we need one relatively quickly to go over some of these.
We do. It'll be within the next week, 10 days.
Okay. Councillor Augustine.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair. Just to echo Councillor Tim's comments about thanking staff, I certainly want to thank staff for the timeline. That was something that we talked about here in committee and I had raised. You know, it's important to have the timeline. They put together a very long timeline, and there's a long lead up to the Burgoyne Bridge and the replacement. I was kind of hoping Councillor Rigby would have been here at this moment, because I know that he was quite concerned through the timeline of, it's not necessarily here per se, but about the request from the province to change where the piles were, et cetera, and having a crossover span, which added, as Councillor Rigby has stated, added a considerable amount of cost. And I'm cognizant that there's a referral, so I just wanted to know if that's in this timeline or not, or when that occurred, and maybe the commissioner can point that out to me.
Commissioner?
Through you, Chair, and actually with the referral motion, it works well because this was just given to you today. You can digest it and have the discussion at the task force meeting. Specifically to the question, the red box under geotechnical highlights where that change occurred. I think there were two questions in there, when we went to the deep pile foundation, but also when, and it was a requirement, actually it's through the one previous to that, EA and detailed design, when it was a condition of the MTO to span across both 12 Mile Creek as well as the 406. Apologize, I can't specifically point it out right now, but it is included.
Yeah, it was a key component. I know to Councillor Rigby, and I thought it was a compelling case to say people are asking, why did the cost escalate? It's certainly poor soil conditions, but also the change in the span at the request of the MTO is an important feature. And I think when we had that discussion about should the province pay more, et cetera, it was their request. So maybe staff could just look at that and how to underline that. Thank you.
Seeing no further questions or comments, I'll call the question on receiving and referring. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried. CWCD 365-2017. Yeah, okay, so I should do that first. Go Implementation Office. Are there any questions or comments on that? Can I get a mover to receive that report? Moved by Councillor Quirk, second by Councillor Marshall. Questions and comments, Councillor Quirk.
Thank you. Through you, Chair, I just want to say thanks to Matt and his team for putting this report together. It's actually pretty comprehensive. I was just wondering, one of the issues that was raised in it is the sort of the agreement in principle, the memorandum of understanding that we raised with the minister at AMO. I was just wondering if the team has any response back from the minister to see if they're any further ahead with the agreement in principle.
Mr. Robinson, you want to take that?
Through you, Chair. Actually, we had just received word back this week from Metrolinx, so staff will initiate that discussion. It's an ongoing dialogue to look at where divergences in the proposal are and where we can work together with Metrolinx to iron out what that looks like going forward.
Thank you.
Councillor Volpatti. You're on the list.
Just the date is wrong on one of them.
It's on the appendix.
On the appendix, right? And,
oh, okay, we'll adjust that.
but it was advertised, or it was said to Niagara Falls Council,
right,
that the date would be Tuesday, October 18th. So I had it marked on my calendar for tonight. I was going tonight, actually, until I noticed the discrepancy. So it should be, I don't know, posted on our website or
Can we
something?
tweet that out, maybe?
Pardon?
Can we tweet it out?
Can we do that?
So through you, Chair, I can confirm that the only place that that typo of Tuesday the 18th exists is in the appendix to that report. We've seen social media, whether Facebook, Twitter, our website, Niagara Falls, all have Wednesday the 18th. That includes our newspaper ads as well as our postcards that have been mailed out to the secondary plan area. So.
Yeah. But if you were at the council meeting or heard the council meeting report, it was advertised as Tuesday, the 18th. So I think if we tweet it once again, it might be a good idea.
Okay.
Because I will not be there tonight.
Any further questions or comments? Councillor Augustine.
Sorry, for some reason I couldn't push my button. Thanks, Mr. Chair. There's a couple of comments in the report about sequencing and planning and execution and sequencing between Metrolinx and CN. Can I just ask, when a future report comes to us, can we see how the sequencing matches up to what we were promised back in June of 2016 to what they're on now? I think it'd be interesting to look at, are they on target? Are they accelerating? And I know it's confusing because there's a lot of work to go on, but if you can just do it at a high level, are we on the sequencing path or not?
Through you, Chair, I appreciate the question. I think that's the biggest component of the project to date is the sequencing. We're certainly working really closely with our local partners in Grimsby, St. Catharines, and Niagara Falls to look at the local elements of road network improvements, for example, layering those on to the regional projects like Thoroldstone Road, Bridge Street example in Niagara Falls, as well as sort of the Erie Street, which is a big piece for them at the city, as well as sequencing that with the improvements from both Metrolinx and CN. So I can say at this point that Metrolinx is on target. There are updates, and that sort of those milestones are outlined on the councillor project website. I have listed out all of those pieces and the milestones that exist there. I don't know how much of that is front-facing, but it is all loaded in there, the sequence as we know it. But to your point, Councillor, something at a high level which can speak to those in a report, we can certainly bring that back to Public Works.
Councillor Timms. People can't seem to log.
Just wanted to thank the office, Mr. Robinson's office, and the whole team for the level of cooperation and coordination with the City of St. Catharines. I've attended a couple of the public meetings, and I know they've established the Ridley Neighborhood Committee. So there's an excellent level of coordination, cooperation between the city and the region on this project, and I just wanted to compliment staff on how well that is going.
Thank you very much. Seeing no
Thank you.
further questions or comments, all those in favor? Opposed, if any? It's approved. Final item is just the dates for the Clean Water Act Standard Care training dates. Can I get a mover and seconder to receive this? Moved by Councillor Quirk, second by Councillor Bentley. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? It's carried. There's no items for in-camera session, so if there are any other items of other business? No, Councillor Grenier.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I can, just the management of the Humberstone landfill had occasion to go by a couple of days ago. To get to the working part of the landfill, if you are presenting recyclable and divertible materials, you still have to cross through the scale and pay. Previous to the new management, that wasn't the case. So can we look into that and make sure that we're not deterring people from self-delivering materials to the landfill, and review perhaps with the liaison committee and the staff that we might want to ask the contractor for a different approach to that if you're bringing divertible materials, typical blue box materials there in larger quantities, that we're actually charging people for that. And I'm not so sure that that's a great idea.
Commissioner?
Thank you.
Through you, Chair, I'll follow up on that specific request because I know at other facilities it's accommodated, but I'll have to follow up specifically with Humberstone.
Thank you very much. Seeing nothing further, we are adjourned until November 7th. Well, that was longer by about an hour.